I've studied biology for years. I was always interested in the way animals behave and why they do the things they do. I hoped I could use my knowledge in biology to pursue a future of paleontology. I couldn't find a job that could pay well and let me use my knowledge on prehistory. This is my final year in college, and I still haven't found a proper path to take. I felt like every human was born with a specific trait. Some were born smart, some were born strong, some a mix of both. I don't think of myself as a smart person. I possess rational thinking skills and a good understanding of animal behaviors. I was born with an obsession with prehistoric life. I was fascinated by genetic behaviors hardwired into animals based on ancient memories of trial and error. If I remember correctly, those are innate behaviors. Adrenaline could revert man into a feral beast fueled by the hope of survival. Those ideas couldn't help me work a 9-to-5 job at a retail chain. I could never use my knowledge to better myself. I began to loathe my curse. Wonder only brought you so far. However, my fascination would later become a convenience. I can't begin to describe how strange this situation came to be. I hope whoever reads this has a good laugh. Theologists and paleontologists are probably laughing at my testimony. At this point, believing me or not doesn't matter, as that isn't what I should be talking about. I don't remember all their names or if they had family. I regret it. It was on a Friday afternoon, while my classmates were eager to get home after enduring a grueling week of exams. I headed to the science lab to meet up with the professor. Our professor, Mr. Princeps, had organized an event for me and a select few to go on a field trip to Costa Rica. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say I was shaking with anticipation. I had no girlfriend to spend my summer with, no job to attend, and my parents were busy with work. They decided to give me some money to pay for the trip. Professor Princeps studied the classroom of eager students. Unlike most school trips, we would not gain any sort of extra credit or reward. We simply went on this trip for the love of biology. A student I didn't recognize tapped the tip of his pencil against the laminated plastic desk, smudging the gray chalky substance as he moved his arm. Princeps adjusted his rectangular glasses and opened a tin can of breath mints. "I'm glad you could all make it here today," Princeps said, smiling. "This is the largest number of students to join me on our annual trip so far. I am honored to be your guide on our trip to Costa Rica." He beamed through his bushy gray mustache. "I've heard from my partner that they're doing some kind of new experiment with birds, but I don't know much about that yet. Anyway," he slowed, noticing he was starting to rant. The class stared at him with anticipation. I raised my hands. "Yes, Luke," the doctor said. His attention turned to me. I cleared my throat, eager to learn more. "What kind of experiment with birds?" "Well, I don't know much. But neat," Professor Princeps explained. "And I do know that they're bringing large bird species in from other continents. I think to see how they adapt to the humid climate." I scratched my head. I was going to ask another question, but I decided to let it rest. I didn't want my classmates to get mad at me. "That settles it." "Then," the professor said, "I hope to see you all at the airport tomorrow." I parked my old, beaten car far away from the entrance to avoid traffic. I noticed a few of my other classmates getting out of their cars. Some all got out of one car. They must have convinced their friends to join the trip. In retrospect, I'm glad I never brought any of my friends. As excited as I was for this trip, being in a new environment with a bunch of strangers didn't sit right with me. I dragged my luggage through the automatic doors and adjusted the backpack resting on my shoulder. I saw Professor Princeps surrounded by at least 7 other students. I went to join the group. The next day wasn't very interesting or memorable. I went through customs, dealt with TSA, and headed to the gate. Our group all sat relatively close to each other. I sat next to a student with dark, curly hair and glasses. Beads of sweat dripped down his neck. "Scared of flying?" I asked him. He scratched his skinny arms and looked at his lap. "A little," he said, lying. "You know, they're more likely to die driving to the airport than actually crash," I said reassuringly. "Gee, thanks," he said sarcastically. "Everyone's heard that one." "So, you're just scared of flying?" I said, trying to fix our conversation. "Yeah, I don't really care about statistics. I just don't like it," the guy said, twirling his jet black curls. "That's fair. Anyways, what's your name?" I don't think I have any classes with you, I said in a friendly tone. My name is Matthew. I don't attend most of my biology classes because I already know everything. He said, whatever helps you sleep at night. I said, hoping he wouldn't notice. I decided I needed to at least understand the guy. Matthew? So, Matthew, what video games do you play? I asked him. Video games? I usually play retro Sega games on the Genesis console. I was trying my best not to judge him. This man was overly pretentious. But at the same time, I respected his choices. I'm just gonna sleep through this one, I said quickly. I did exactly that. When I woke up, my whole body was stiff. I stretched my legs and popped my knees as far as I could in the small space available to me. We exited the plane. The humid climate felt like walking into a bathroom after someone took a shower. I tugged on my shirt collar. We were all loaded onto buses and transported to the camp. I walked along the side of my bus, inhaling the hot fumes and hearing the loud rattling of the engine. I noticed a dead animal along the dirt road. It must have been some type of bird. I decided to avoid it so I wouldn't get sick. I sat in the back of the bus while everyone else talked with their friends. We eventually pulled up to the campsite and exited the bus. All right, class. Put away your things, Princeps said, pointing to the large tent-like building. When you're settled, follow the signs and make your way to the Discovery Center. We are about to miss something special. I hurried and put my suitcase under my bed. I was lucky to have the bottom bunk. It wasn't a privilege. I was just stubborn and preferred being close to the floor in case I roll out of the bed. As we entered the lab, a bearded, olive-skinned man in a lab coat greeted us. Dr. Princeps introduced him as his friend, Dr. Harding. Dr. Harding stood before a table with eggs incubating an advanced device. What we are witnessing, gentlemen, is the hatching of a baby king vulture. The nest was abandoned, so I took it in. It's a miracle that the egg survived this long without a mother. Drive it, Harding said, his voice oozing with excitement. Shush, it's hatching, Princeps said, hushing the class. The tall bleached white egg shook and cracked, crumbling to pieces to reveal the hatchling. The featherless chick, coated in the egg's fluids, slowly moved out of the shattered shell. Dr. Harding collected the shattered eggshell and threw it away. He gently picked up the hatchling and showed it to the class. The class talked in hushed whispers. Where's its beak? Is that a claw? That's too big to be a vulture, right? I looked down at the chick, pushing past the crowd. My blood ran cold. On its leg, above where the talons would be, was a fully pronounced dinosaurian sickle claw. I said, baffled, is not a vulture. Jotine turned to Professor Princeps and gave him a look I couldn't understand. Princeps pulled his cell phone out of his pocket and sent a text to an unknown number. Since we got to the camp late, we didn't have much time to explore our new home. I sat in bed staring up at the top bunk. The other students in my dorm room were fast asleep. Some were snoring. I couldn't get the thought out of my head. I had to see it. At around 1200 in the morning, I crept out into the main area. The camp consisted of many buildings surrounded by an outdoor garden. I walked through the dark garden, listening to the croaking sounds of frogs and the calls of birds. I noticed an exhibit with a bird symbol over the door. I was confident they moved the hatchling into that exhibit. My hands reached the handle when I was confronted. And what are you doing up this late? A cunning male voice said from behind me. I turned to see a tall Asian man with messy black hair. His lips were twisted into a smug grin. I held my hands over my head and closed my eyes. I guess you caught me. Camp counselor, or whatever your job is. What's my punishment? I proclaimed unenthusiastically. Don't worry. You don't have to apologize. I know exactly what you want to do, he said, looming over me. My heart pounded. What might that be? I said, trying my best to conceal my fear. We get your types every year. I understand completely. Everyone has the right to learn. I'm just eager to see the animals up close. Right? I was exactly like you when I was younger, he said in a warm tone. His voice seemed passive-aggressive, but I couldn't really tell because of its higher tone. I looked him up and down nervously. You're not doubting me, are you? He asked, pulling me from my internal debate. And no, I wouldn't do that. I stuttered. Good to hear. I'll give you 20 minutes. If I don't see you back in your dorm by then, I'll send you home," he said, his eyes piercing into my soul. I nodded understandingly. I watched as he walked back to the employee dorms as I entered the unlocked lab. There were many enclosures holding animals from toucans to ostriches. Why were ostriches here? I made my way to a concrete lab bench with a tall bird cage on top. Inside was the hatchling. I crouched to get a better look at it. There was a plastic syringe full of mush nutrients next to the cage. But it does not look like it has been used. I walked outside and snatched a beetle off a leaf. I went back inside, opened the cage, and gave the hatchling the beetle. The hatchling stood up and wobbled towards the insects. I was stunned. A bird alive for less than 12 hours was already walking. I wasn't sure if birds were even able to do that. Even so, I knew that animal was not a bird. The hatchling scooped up the beetle and crunched it in its teeth. Its head bobbed as it crept into a corner and ate, as never breaking contact with mine. Its eyes were not bird-like. They were bright orange with a yellow tint. It reminded me more of a lizard than anything. A wing fell from the hatchling's mouth. The hatchling ruffled its quill-like proto-feathers, wiping the guts off of its face. I must admit that at the time, the hatchling was adorable. I'm not sure if it was that big when it hatched. Though, no, I'm absolutely certain of it. That animal has grown at least a few inches. In order to do that, it would have to eat huge amounts of food. But it doesn't look like it's eaten anything besides the beetle. It couldn't be a bird. Its skin was too thick and scaly. The body was too long and slender for a hatchling vulture. It barely even had a beak. It was more akin to some sort of reptile. The best way to describe it was prehistoric. 115 million years ago, Deinonychus went extinct. Somehow, maybe by pure chance or by the actions of man, Deinonychus has been born once more. If I told you the morning went better, I would be lying. Mel woke up from our shallow slumber. I felt like I slept on a pile of rocks. The dorm room's walls had faded, peeling paint. The ceiling light had a barely noticeable buzz. All the small inconveniences all piled onto me, my morning hard to get used to. I rushed through breakfast at the cafeteria. I felt a chill run down my spine as I ate hashed brown. Turning around, I set my gaze on the counselor I encountered last night. His bright silver eyes felt like cameras waiting to catch a criminal. I couldn't tell if he was smiling or sneering at me. I finished my food and washed it down with a swig of orange juice. I excitedly rushed to the birdhouse as soon as I could. The cage wasn't just empty. It was destroyed. The cage door had been ripped off. The glass door was shattered. The bird seemed alert and stressed. An African gray parrot truffled its feathers and bobbed its head. "Class," the bird said in a monotone voice. "Projects. Class. October." It recited random words, bobbing its head excitedly. Before I even realized it, the whole camping crew was in the room with me, trying to figure out what happened. My classmates were distraught at the loss of their new pet. They eventually settled on the bird escaping. However, I knew that wasn't the case. The cage had been ripped open from the outside. I decided to tell them my theory and see what could have happened. Back when we were ignorant, we believed a monkey had somehow broken in and ate the hatchling. Howler monkeys were known to trample the garden and steal the various fruits grown by the staff. They kept their distance from humans, but that didn't stop them from causing problems. A monkey breaking into a building on a campsite was unheard of unless a window was left open near the canopy. Due to the lack of residue from the hatchling, it was likely carried away instead of eaten on the spot. Everyone started to exit the bird room. I walked closer to the African gray parrot and watched it as it climbed around its massive cage with its feet and beak. It grabbed a twig, lodged it under the cage door, and pushed it open. It climbed out of the cage and flew on top of a tank. It looked at me, tilted its head, and made a strange calling sound. It used its feet to scratch its neck. "Hi, bird," I said in an adoring tone. "Hi, bird," it repeated in the same tone of voice. The parrot grabbed a nut and hobbled over to a bowl and dropped it in. The parrot danced and clanged its beak against the bowl, its intelligent eyes watching me with anticipation. "Treat," it said. I opened a few drawers and found a bag of sunflower seeds. I opened the bag, and the parrot immediately landed on my arm and scarfed down the seeds. I quickly shut the bag and put it back in the drawer. A primitive mechanical device beeped, opening a door behind the ostrich enclosure, allowing them to go outside and roam in their pen. As I was walking back to the cafeteria to receive a briefing on daily activities, I was confronted by the counselor, who then introduced himself as Ezekiel. I don't think you broke the door or stole the hatchling. I am going to make that very clear, Zeke told me. However, that does not clear your name in this event. Nobody else knows you went in the bird room last night. I nodded as he continued. I do want to know one thing. Did you see anything when you left the bird room? I pretended to think, but I already knew I had nothing to tell him. No, I don't recall anything suspicious. Zeke looked me in the eye. Well, Luke, I believe you. I'm willing to put my faith in your testimony. I had nothing to worry about because I was telling the whole truth. The first day went by quickly. We went ziplining, hiking through nature trails. A guy named Isaac demonstrated his expert tree climbing skills. Professor Princeps had to stop him from grabbing a bird nest 20 feet off the ground. When we arrived back at the campsite, we were all given tie-dye shirts in traditional camp fashion. The bright colors gave me a headache. I stepped over a branch went drive. Harding held his hand out, stopping me from moving forward. Ants, he said. I looked down at a colony of small black ants clustered around a tree. These are bullet ants. Don't touch them, he told the group. They all live with the same directive, feed the colony. These ants use swarm tactics to overwhelm their prey. Then they use their immense strength to pull the corpse back to the colony. Harding lectured. And of course, if they manage to bite you, it won't stop hurting until the next day. If you're lucky. I reached down to scratch the weird tickling feeling on my leg. Right before my nail made contact with my skin, I noticed the unmistakable shape of an ant. Without thinking, I swiped it off my leg. I almost sighed with relief when I noticed the ant crawling on my hand. I squealed like a toddler and brushed my hands together. I couldn't find the ant after that. On the second day, we went on a hike to a creek. Once we made our way to the sea. We all boarded a canoe in groups up to 3. I got a boat with the most unathletic people I've ever met. I did most of the heavy lifting, paddling us through the dim jungle. The creek was covered by the jungle roof. Try not to get your hands in the water. We sometimes find caiman around this area. Drive, Harding said. Unfortunately, it was difficult to enjoy the scenery, as I was straining my muscles to pull the skinny guys who held the paddle sideways. Suddenly, the oar was pulled into the water. I tried my best to win the tug of war. I lost my grip. The oar swung overboard, smacking into my temple as it plunged into the water. The hell? The kid behind me said. Why do you drop it? I sneered. I didn't drop it. Something pulled it in. I hissed at him, already agitated from straining myself. He gave me a confused look. What do you mean? I repeat myself. Something pulled my oar into the water, and I can't get it back. I suddenly had a realization. What's the depth? Sorry? The kid asked. What's the depth of the river right now? I repeated. Oh, the depth is, he said, examining the device implanted into the side of the canoe. It says for meters. Are you sure? I think my oar could have been stuck on the riverbed. I told him. No, wait. It says to meters now. He said with a look of concern. That's not possible. We are in the middle of the creek. It doesn't get shallow here. I said. 1 meter now. My eyes wide, and in realization, a large object collided with the bottom of the canoe. I could hear the hard plastic scrape against a rough surface. We huddled towards the middle of the canoe as it walked wildly. A massive shape traveled below the surface of the river, barely disturbing the water. It moved sluggishly as it traveled along the light currents. Is that a crocodile? The guy behind me asked. No, it's too big, I said, confused. Could it be a saltwater crocodile? Then, he asked, those things live in Australia. I doubt they would migrate here. I said, unsure. The tail propelled the creature, causing a small ripple in the water. The animal shook its head. A moment later the oar resurfaced, snapped in half. I quickly grabbed the oar and examined the damage. The guy in front of me widened his eyes. What did that? I held out my hand. Give me your oar. Mergor said here all day. On the 3rd day, we were allowed to go free roam and find fruit to bring back to study. We were warned of dangerous species of ants and other insects. I opted to walk by a stream, hoping plants could grow next to the water source. I noticed a large mango tree hanging over the stream, but something was off. The mangoes were the size of watermelons. I watched as one snapped from the weak branch and hit the ground with a wet thud. The roots of the mango tree had visible purple veins that were brighter when closer to the water. "Guys, over here," I shouted. I looked around the empty forest. "Is anyone here? I have to see this," I shouted again. "Over here." I desperately wanted someone to see these strange fruits. I decided to grab one and carry it back. It felt like it was going to pop at any second, as the mango was not meant to be that size. The stem was oozing a purple substance, and I heard something from behind me that I'll never forget. "Over here." The voice was deep and scratchy, as if someone were to talk after being sick for weeks. It sounded guttural, like it wasn't coming from vocal cords. Like a parrot. "Over here," it said again. I slowly turned around and dropped my melon-sized mango. Thud. Here. I was standing face to face with a prehistoric predator. I froze. I didn't even breathe. Fiery orange eyes. Sleek feathers. It was about as tall as my rested elbow. Its body was coated in gray and white feathers, excluding the head, which sported black feathers. The muzzle lacked any sort of plumage, but made up for it with bright red scaly skin. Over its eyes sported protruding eyebrow feathers that occasionally flared up. The Deinonychus bobbed its head. I held my breath and stood still. It tilted its head to the side curiously. It inched closer, its sharp toe claws digging into the loose soil. The sunlight filtered through the trees, causing the light to refract off the feathers like a kaleidoscope. "Over here." It barked again. "Over here." I repeated in an exhausted exhalation. Its eyebrow feathers raised as its head perked up with newfound curiosity. It inched closer. I raised my hands over my head like a bear. The Deinonychus backed away. Intimidated, the theropod balanced on a bipedal stance elegantly, walking backwards without stumbling. The tail readjusted as it walked. The dinosaur waved its tail feathers in a slow, hypnotic motion and hissed softly. In the blink of an eye, the Deinonychus dashed away into the thicket, carrying a mango melon with it. I wanted nothing more than to announce my victory. I decided to grab a mango and take it back to the camp. The trip back was nothing short of a journey. A mango, which weighed at least 8 pounds, was hard to hold on to, especially given its strange proportions. I had to travel uphill, my tendons straining as I scaled the elevated path. When I reached the campus, I shifted the mango into one hand and opened the door. "You're late, Lucas," Professor Princeps said. The other students looked at me in confusion. "What is that in your hand?" Princeps asked. "Oh, this?" I asked, remembering the fact I was carrying something. "It's a mango." The crowd exchanged confused glances. "That isn't a cantaloupe," someone whispered. "Hand it to me." "Luke," Princeps said warmly. The professor grabbed the melon-sized mango. He set it down on a table and cut into it with forceps. Thick, purple liquid bled from the fruit. "I must say, Mr. Luke, this is an interesting specimen," the professor said. I nodded my head in agreement. "Are you sure this is a mango?" he said. "It looks more like a decaying cantaloupe. But what is this purple ooze?" he said, examining the liquid stuck between his fingers. He pulled a piece off the mango and took a bite out of it. The class was shocked, concerned about the risk of the fruit being toxic. "This thing tastes absolutely delicious," Princeps said in awe. "It's sweeter than candy. The texture feels like biting into a giant block of honey." Princeps turned to me. "Lucas, where can I find more of these?" he asked, anxiously waiting for my answer. "That's the hard part," I said morosely. "I want you all to take me very seriously. There is a bird, a large flightless bird. It was there when I found the tree. It could be very dangerous." I decided that although it could be helpful to tell them what kind of animal it was, I wouldn't. If they didn't believe me when I told them it was a dinosaur, they would assume the rest of my story is also false. I didn't want anyone to go looking for the tree and getting hurt. Professor Princeps thanked me for giving them helpful information. "All right, class," he announced. "Let's move on to the next station, insect identification." The class began to pack up and leave. As I started to walk out the door, he called for me. "Everyone can leave except for Luke. Everyone can leave except for Luke." I froze. Professor Princeps never talks in that serious tone. When the laboratory was empty, he ate a breath mint and cleared his throat. "Tell me, Luke, Was there anything else of importance you would like me to know? Anything at all? He said seriously. There was one thing. The roots of the mango tree were siphoning water from a stream. The roots had strange purple veins, the same shade as the liquid sap inside the mango. Princeps paused for a moment. His demeanor suddenly changed, as if he had thought of something he forgot to do. Damn it, Harding, he muttered to himself. This might seem like an odd question, but are you familiar with tectonic plates? He asked me. Yes, I know they cause earthquakes. He chuckled. Indeed, they do. However, what is under those plates? What is buried deep in the mantle of our planet? For all we know, you could dig up the wrong rock and contract anthrax. It's just too complicated. What are you getting at? I asked, genuinely curious. It's just a hunch, but maybe these fruits are a product of this river. Maybe the water is an invasive pathogen or virus of some sort. He explained. Something about his confidence told me that he didn't come up with that theory on the spot. If you believe that, I guess I'll tell you one more thing. I said finally. Go ahead. He smiled. The animal that I met at the tree was the saurid known as Deinonychus anteriops. The professor laughed. It wasn't a mocking laugh. It was a laugh of excitement and eagerness. His face softened. I want to see this tree, he said to me. I refuse to tell you the location, I said, regretting the words as they left my mouth. Why not? He said, disappointed. I told him that it wasn't safe, especially because of how unpredictable wild animals are, especially when under the influence of whatever is in the stream. I have weapons that can turn a goddamn X into a pile of flesh. I'm not scared of a bird, as much as I hated to admit it. I wanted nothing more than to go back to the side of the stream. I sighed and accepted, telling him I would be his guide. The professor smiled. I'm glad you came to your senses. Think of what we could accomplish out there. We could name a species after us. Imagine it. Deinonychus jacobulensis. No, absolutely not, I said with certainty. He frowned like a child denied a toy. Can I go too? A voice suddenly asked. We both turned to look at the speaker. It was a woman from my class. Who are you? I asked, dumbfounded. Where did you come from? Professor Princeps said. My name is Elizabeth. She smiled, ignoring the second question. She had blonde, curly hair and freckles. She was about my height, which is a little over 5'10". Why do you want to go? I asked. I'm bored. You're bored? You're in a damn jungle. How the hell can you be bored? I raised my voice, offended at her downright blasphemous remark. Calm down, Luke. Princeps silenced me and turned to the girl. Elizabeth, I'm afraid I have to deny you this trip. It isn't safe. Please let me go. I'll do anything, she begged. I couldn't help but notice that she somehow hid without anyone seeing her colorful sweater the entire time. I wanted to ask her if she was hot wearing that, but it wouldn't be very relevant. The sun began to set as we debated. Look, it's getting late. Let's just stop chatting, shall we? Princeps said. If you don't let me go with you, I'll tell everyone you all are leaving, she said, getting caught IR. I groaned in annoyance. Just let her go, I said to Princeps. If she gets hurt, it was her call. He agreed. We made our way to the building across the main garden area to meet up with the rest of the group when we heard a loud crashing sound, followed by a screech of pain. The bird room, Princeps said, rushing to the door. He pushed open the glass door to see the door to the bird's room shattered once more. A few of the captive ostriches fled into the jungle. One ostrich lay motionless in the doorway. In the darkness of the building, I noticed the unmistakable silhouette of the Deinonychus. What is it? Elizabeth said excitedly. Luke was right. Princeps whispered. It's a fucking dinosaur. A saurid tilted its head up and barked. Is that a velociraptor? Elizabeth asked. Somehow worse than that, I replied. That's the second time ostriches have escaped into the wild. The professor grumbled. I slowly turned to face him, stunned. Second? I whispered loudly. Also, why worry about that when we're dealing with? The Deinonychus turned to look at us. It fled quickly, like a fox fleeing a henhouse. The feathered tail disappearing into the brush. Tomorrow, we look for the stream. Get some rest, Princeps said finally. I walked to the dorms. Elizabeth followed close behind, grinning with her hands behind her back. "Are you excited?" she said enthusiastically, walking with a childlike strut. Honestly, yeah, I am," I told her. She reminded me of a child. She perceived the world as a grand adventure. A part of me wanted to be annoyed at her energetic demeanor, but a part of me enjoyed having a mouthy companion. She was charming to be around, as cruel as that makes me seem. We entered the dorms and got ready to sleep. After I brushed my teeth and changed into a large t-shirt and old shorts, I crawled into my bed and pulled the covers over my body. "Where have you been?" Matthew said suddenly, looking down at me from the top bunk. "None of your business," I said firmly. "We were actually going to look for Elizabeth," began but stopped when I shushed her silently. "That sounds fun. Can I join?" he asked. "You don't even know what we're doing," I told him. "Yeah, I do. We're going to look for the fruit," he said confidently. Damn it, I didn't even bother arguing with him. He'll forget we even had this conversation by morning. "Can you all do me a favor and shut the hell up?" Isaac's disembodied voice said from across the room. I looked around for which bed he was in. "Sorry," I said quietly. I turned on my phone and opened Instagram. With no connection, I simply stared at a loading screen. A loon called from somewhere in the jungle. Loons didn't live in coastal environments, right? I guess I really needed to sleep. So that's exactly what I did. The next morning was when everything went downhill. What happened on that day could not be described with logic alone. It would be like explaining how an ant grew wings and quadrupled in size. But even that wouldn't compare. That's just stupid. We told the rest of the campers and staff we were leaving under the pretense of catching the escaped ostriches. The professor didn't tell them he was bringing a shotgun. We left at 7:28 in the morning. The weather was humid and densely foggy. I tied my shoes and left with the others. We left the premises of the camp. I tried my best to retrace my steps. We descended down a nature trail, passing ant hills and monkey troops. I made sure not to trip on any roots. But Elizabeth casually walked without a care. Professor Princeps, shotgun in hand, followed closely. In any other circumstance, a shotgun would be overkill. However, a shotgun wasn't enough. We turned around a bend and were met with an absolutely putrid sight. It took several minutes to even comprehend what the hell it was. It was the corpse of a howler monkey crushed against a tree. The tree was torn to shreds. It looked like the corpse had melted into the tree's wounds. Flies surrounded the carcass, but it didn't look like a predator had eaten from the corpse. The most bizarre thing about this encounter was the lack of blood. Sure, the corpse was covered in it, but there was no blood pooling down below. Something must have killed it, and chucked the corpse away. The professor said in an impressed tone. I held my breath as we walked past the corpse. Despite all we'd seen so far, nothing could prepare us for what came next. We entered a clearing next to the stream. Then we saw the tree. The mango tree darted along the canopy. The mangoes were still the same size, but in such a large quantity that the floor around the tree was one giant puddle of skin and purple fluid. There were exposed body parts of animals submerged in the ooze. A baby monkey was halfway submerged, surrounded by sticks and mud. I shuddered at the thought of a parent trying its best to free their child from the substance. In the misty area, it was hard to determine the size of the tree. The fruits seemed to glow like lanterns. Suddenly, the purple substance began to retreat into a hole by the tree. Corpses sank into the ooze and into a pit. I felt it tugging at my ankle. Before I could comprehend what was going on, Professor Princeps grabbed my arms and pulled me back out of the ooze. Is eating? Princeps asked himself. This is impossible. We should stop trying to reason with ourselves. All logic has long since gone out the window, Elizabeth said, her formal statement slightly startling me. Like a drain, the purple substance retreated into the depression in the ground. We expected to just see a hole in the earth. What we really saw was 1,000 times worse. It appeared to be some sort of digestive organ made of organic tissue. It inhaled and exhaled through a crude sphincter. A putrid scent of rotten carcasses emitted from the opening, causing flies to enter. What? I said at a loss for words. Crunch. All three of us turned around. In the fog stood a bird-like creature as tall as a 10-story house. It remained completely motionless but appeared to be watching eagerly. The animal was completely engulfed in fog, making it impossible to determine where its eyes were. The worst part was the claws. Almost a meter long. The claws hung down from the bipedal animal's hands, occasionally clicking together or twitching. Frozen with fear, the three of us watched as it turned its head, sizing us up. I knew this animal. The Deinonychus, I said, my breath barely a whisper. Carnivores usually hunt and ambush their prey. Herbivores, however, are much worse to encounter. They don't kill for food. They simply kill to protect themselves. We were in its territory. The animal tapped its claws together quietly as it watched us. I couldn't even see its chest rising or falling. It simply stayed motionless. The wind waved its feathers. A nugget slammed into the ground beside it. The Deinonychus continued to stare. It felt like a lifetime had passed during our standoff. Could Princeps shoot it? Even if he managed to land a hit on it, the animal would likely retaliate violently. Even if it was on the brink of death. Princeps turned to me. What do we do? He whispered. Claws. Make them break. I forced myself to say through labored breathing. Our communication conjured the Deinonychus's interest. It took a step forward, emitting a guttural chattering. The tail feathers swayed hypnotically as it approached like a leopard gecko approaching a cricket. It raked its claws in the dead plants. I tapped my partner's shoulders and gestured towards a rock to my left. He made a break for the boulder. The Deinonychus became enraged and began its pursuit. The massive claws swept past us. I grabbed my comrades and dove into the grass. The keratin no US claws made contact with the rock. I opened my eyes, expecting to see shattered keratin. The Deinonychus claws were for display only, so using them as weapons would be impractical. Or so I thought. I turned behind me to see that the rock was the one damaged. Elizabeth and the professor caught on to my terrified expression and darted away quickly. I ran behind a tree. It never growled or snarled. The only thing I heard was its deep breaths as it pursued. The Deinonychus cleaved the tree in half. The claws dismantled the falling tree, causing the bark to rain down on me. It swung once more, its malevolent claws raking into my left shoulder. I sucked air through my teeth in pain. The claws reached down the back of my shirt, holding me in place. I pulled my arms into my shirt and slid out of it. The dinosaur examined the tidy shirt with curiosity. It guided the shirt into its beaked mouth and chewed slowly before letting it fall out. I collapsed into the dirt, the many roots and rocks scraping my skin. The massive dinosaur plunged its claws into the soil, pinning me between two of them. I grabbed onto the claws and smashed a rock into the soft flesh above the claw. Enraged, the Deinonychus cried out in pain and dropped its other claw down, trying to pierce my neck. I pulled myself up and used my momentum to slide past the attack. Shoot it, I screamed, directing my weight to my back leg. I pushed my body to the side to evade the next swipe. The Deinonychus snapped at me, its beak snapping shut inches away from my ear. Blood ran down my body as I sprinted away into the deep jungle. It did not pursue. I heard the sound of gunshots as I tumbled down a hill and fell into a muddy river. This river was much larger than the stream we found previously, but it still possessed the eerie glow of the stream. My eyes widened with the newfound realization. My blood drained into the water. I felt my left arm go limp. I noticed a swarm of aquatic insects swimming around me. They had the appearance of dragonfly larvae, but much larger, probably about the size of a bar of soap. I tried my best to drag myself out onto the riverbank. I grabbed hold of a massive skeleton and pulled myself out of the water. I turned back and stared directly into the cold eyes of a massive crocodile. The Deinonychus stared at me as I stumbled away from the water, its ank into the depths, its massive tail stirring the water as it descended. I felt hazy and realized I must have hit my head when I fell. I felt like my neck was about to break from the weight of my cranium. I instinctively ducked as I heard the loud buzzing of a massive dragonfly swooping over my head. It sounded like a small helicopter. The insect hovered inches away from my face. I didn't want to swat it because the thought of me touching an insect that launched made me gag. The Deinonychus azed away and chased after a lizard perched on a branch. The anole jumped too late, as the large sharp legs snatched it midair. Shit. I made a huge mistake coming here. I stumbled into the forest, the trees waving like grass in the wind as I navigated through the mirage. I felt humbled by nature, my apathetic and intelligent visage crumbling to reveal a pathetic and weak shadow of my former glory. I had wasted my life. never slowing down to realize how irritating I must have appeared to others. After an hour, I realized I was lost. I rested my hand on my shoulder wound and felt the new sensation of a smooth cluster of slimy round objects, which I soon deduced to be maggots burrowed in my flesh. I scratched the wound, causing the dozens of tiny insects to dig deeper in my flesh. I held in my scream and kept moving. Fatigued, I dragged my feet through the jumble. I processed the thought of laying down and sleeping. I wanted nothing more than to stop moving and let the jumble digest me. I was going to die. They say that nobody dies without regrets. I would probably agree with the majority. I never did anything outright terrible in my life. At its worst, it was just unfulfilling. I never accomplished anything great or saved a life. I just passed my classes and did the bare minimum. Was I really happy with that? Absolutely not. It was my fate to meet these anomalies. Whether I died to them or made them a turning point in my life was my choice alone. That's why I'll keep trudging through the jungle. My legs felt like the stumps of dead trees. I felt like I was going to buckle under my own weight. I didn't bother asking how I hadn't lost consciousness from blood loss. Each step felt like a minute passing. Suddenly, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around and saw the camp employees, their eyes wide and in shock. "Holy shit, kid, are you all right?" one of them asked. The other gave the first employee a look that said, "Are you seriously asking that?" I looked down at my hands. My fingernails were caked with blood and my arms covered in dust. I looked like I just crawled out of hell. They told me that I fell to the ground face first. I woke up in the medical facility. A large bandage was wrapped around my left shoulder and upper body. I gazed at the heart rate monitor as it beeped quietly. Despite feeling exhausted, I felt no need to sleep. I wanted to talk to someone immediately. Outside my room, someone looked through the window. It was the professor. A wave of emotions flooded over me. I was relieved of his survivor, angered at his abandonment, and concerned at why he was watching me. I stared him in the eye. He knocked on the heavy wooden door. I motioned him to enter. He limped into the room, diverting his way to a cane. "Long time no see." I said to him, "Take off your bandage." He said bluntly, "What by my bandage?" I stuttered. "Won't I need that? Just take it off," he ordered sternly. I had no intention of arguing with him. I unwrapped the bloody bandage. He held a mirror behind my back. I was right. I looked into the handheld mirror. My blood ran cold. There was no scar. There was no bruise. My wound had completely healed. How long was I out? I panicked. "A day," he said. I had that. My body had regenerated in a day. "Don't bother asking how," Princeps said as the question began to escape my mouth. "Does the camp know?" I asked frantically, referring to the animal we encountered. "Where's Elizabeth?" "They don't know, and Elizabeth is playing checkers with the other campers," he answered. "That isn't a good idea." "Thing," I said with disgust. "Shouldn't be kept hidden. People could get hurt," I proclaimed. "They'll get hurt whether we tell them or not," he said. I looked at him. "You realize what you're saying, right?" Princeps nodded. "If word gets out, this island could be at risk. Imagine all the scientific advancements we could make here," he said. "Imagine all of the scientists who'll die here," I said coldly. I suddenly realized something. Elizabeth is going to tell everyone what happened. She can't keep her mouth shut. Princeps nodded. "I am aware. Everyone on the campus is going to know. Just not anyone off this island." I couldn't tell what he was thinking. Was it selfishness? Was it pride? Why would Princeps keep those things a secret? Does he want all these discoveries for himself? I learned it a long time ago that trying to reason with anything on this island was a waste of time. We will be evacuating the island when enough planes get here. I suggest you keep everyone informed about what we're dealing with here," he said. I nodded and left the room. As I left the medical facility and went outside into the sunny main thoroughfare, people stared at me like they were seeing a ghost. Elizabeth got up from her checkers game and ran up to me. "How'd you sleep?" she said. She looked down at my body. Where's your shirt?" she asked. "Good question," I said without elaboration. She continued. "What's your workout routine?" Her I was mistaking you for a geek. "What's your max bench?" "You asked too many questions," I said, hiding my smile. As much as I hate to admit it, I did enjoy the attention, as I don't get much of it at home. How did you get away from that dinosaur unscathed? She asked me. I was going to ask you the same thing, I said. Suddenly, Matthew approached me. Is it true you fought a T-Rex? Who won? He asked. You've got to be kidding me. That wasn't a T-Rex, and I wouldn't call it a fight. I shrugged him off. What was it then? He pressured me. You could say it was a giant turkey, I said jokingly. I entered the dorms. I pulled out a clean shirt from my suitcase and pulled it over my body. I examined my arms as they slide out of the short sleeves. Not a single scratch. It must be from soaking in that river. Even then, wouldn't I get an infection from the water? I want to know why this is happening. If this strange liquid causes animals to reverse engineer their offspring, it shall be more primitive. I grew more uneasy as I paced around the room. Nothing about this is right. I struggled to cling to any form of reason. Despite everything, I still wanted to go back out there to the mango tree. I want to see the organic hole next to it as it absorbs the mummified animals. I want to see more dinosaurs. The mere thought concerned me. My basic survival instincts were being thrown aside because of my passion for science. Maybe me and the professor were two sides of the same coin. I don't want to keep guessing. I want to know. I was ignorant back then. Looking at it now, I was reckless and stupid. I didn't fear the consequences. Maybe I was cocky and expected to regenerate my wounds again. I don't understand myself. The camp was on lockdown for the remainder of the trip. Nobody left the premises. Nobody was allowed out. However, nobody accounted for the fact that people were still allowed in. Most of the college students from various schools had gathered in the cafeteria. Most of them were on their phones or talking with friends. You made a quick recovery, Zeke said, taking a seat across the table. I must say, I am thoroughly impressed. You're giving me too much credit. I smiled. I only did the running part. Zeke tapped his chin. He said. Tell me, what did you encounter that could manage to almost slice off your arm? I rested my cheek on my arm. You're not going to believe me. But, he raised an eyebrow. Are you sure it wasn't one of the ostriches that escaped? He asked. Well, yes. But actually no. I elaborated. Do you remember the vulture hatching on the first day of camp? I asked. Yes, I do remember that. A hatchling was an interesting anomaly. He said. To be frank, I think it was a Deinonychus that hatched from that egg. I told him. He stifled a laugh. You're serious? You know that doesn't just happen, right? He said, doubting me. Something told me that he wasn't completely convinced that I was wrong. I explained my theory. Tectonic plates shift in the earth, causing earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. What if the shifting of a plate caused a virus to go into a king stream? What if this virus caused reverse evolution, turning birds back into dinosaurs? What if there was DNA mixed with the virus that turned them into a specific animal? Zeke was at a loss for words. You're an interesting man. Lucas, you think I'm crazy, don't you? I asked, embarrassed. No, not at all. You might be onto something. To say the, he said, taking a bite out of a saltini cracker he snatched from the salad bar. If you are completely correct on your hypothesis, I'd take you for a genius, he said, wiping the dust off his fingers. Matthew sat down beside me. Hey, Zeke, are you an emotional advisor for Luke too? He asked. I turned to Zeke, who gave me an awkward look. Not exactly, he said. Matthew scratched his head. That's odd. Anyway, what are you talking about? Zeke cleared his throat. We're betting on a score for tonight's volleyball game. I think the girls are going to beat the boys 40-35. Can you even get that score in volleyball? I had no clue and didn't bother asking. Something told me Zeke knew about as much as I did. I think I should join the team, Matthew said. When I get in a flow state, I feel half as heavy as normal. I glide on the dance floor. I wanted to smash the palm of my hand against my temple until I stopped hearing. Kef is heavy. Huh? Zeke said. That sounds intriguing. He continued flaunting his volleyball skills. The only thing impressive about his skills was that I didn't know he played volleyball. You took me for an esports kind of guy, I said. Suddenly, all three of us turned to see a figure past the glass window. The glass doors of the entrance shattered. The entire room went completely silent as everyone directed their gaze at the shattered door. A Deinonychus stood tall at the entrance. It was not alone.